Chief of Defense Staff. Post called Chief of Defense Staff was created last year. This is important for us with respect to prelims. So starting with the Chief of Defense Staff, what was the objective of creating such a new post called Chief of Defense Staff? This is the first point. Now this comes under which ministry? That is Ministry of Defense, right? And now we will be dealing with some important points about this Chief of Defense Staff with respect to prelims. Starting with, under the Ministry of Defense, a new department called Department of Military Affairs was created, right? Under the Ministry of Defense, a new department called Department of Military Affairs was created, and this Chief of Defense Staff will be heading this Department of Military Affairs. That is the important point we have to know. And this Chief of Defense Staff was created based on recommendations of two committees. With respect to this Chief of Defense Staff, we have to know these two committees. First is Kargil Review Committee in 2001, Kargil Review Committee in the year 2001, and the second committee is Naresh Chandra Committee in the year 2012. These two committees, Kargil Review Committee in 2001 and Naresh Chandra Committee in 2012. These two committees have recommended about Chief of Defense Staff, right? These we have to know, because if there is any question about Chief of Defense Staff, one of the option can be Chief of Defense Staff was created on Naresh Chandra Committee recommendations, right? So we should be knowing the committee names. So these are the two committees, and this Chief of Defense Staff was a long pending reform in armed forces. Just imagine, Kargil Review Committee recommended for this Chief of Defense Staff in the year 2001, right? In the year 2001, and now it is 2020. So this was a long pending reform in armed forces. And also another function for this Chief of Defense Staff is like a single point military advisor to Defense Minister. This is a very important function for Chief of Defense Staff. He is like a single point military advisor to the Defense Minister. Now, why is this important? Before to this Chief of Defense Staff post, before this post was created, the Defense Minister had to deal with Army, Navy and Air Force. Coordination is not proper. If there is some friction between Army, Navy or Air Force, it is difficult for the Defense Minister to have correct defense preparedness. Imagine during a war. Is it easy to deal with each wing of the armed forces separately, or is it easy to deal with one person who will coordinate these three? Right? It is easy to deal with one person who will coordinate all these three, right? So that's why this Chief of Defense Staff was created. He is a single point military advisor to the Defense Minister. The Defense Minister will be dealing with CODS, that is Chief of Defense Staff, and Chief of Defense Staff will be dealing with these three, the Army, Navy and the Air Force. So coordination will be there. And the other important function is, he is the permanent chairman of Chief of Staffs Committee also. There is a committee called Chief of Staffs Committee, COSC, Chief of Staffs Committee. Now this Chief of Defense Staff is even made the permanent chairman for this Chief of Defense Staff Committee. What is this Chief of Defense Staff Committee? As we have discussed, for cooperation between Army, Navy and Air Force, previously this Chief of Staff Committee was created. Now, who was the chairman before? Previously, for every 1 year, Army, Navy and Air Force chiefs, the Chief of Army or the Chief of Navy or the Chief of Air Force, every 1 year they used to become the chairman. This year, if it is from the Army, next year Navy Chief used to be there. The coming year, Air Force Chief used to be there. Now, that mechanism is removed and this Chief of Defense Staff is made the permanent chairman. Now this Chief of Defense Staff will be the permanent chairman for this Chief of Staff Committee, and also the Army, Navy and Air Force Chief will be the members. This is small change which was brought. And the other thing is this Chief of Defense Staff is also involved in inter-service procurement decisions. Inter-service, that means there may be some defense equipments that are required by both Army and Navy, which may be in common requirement by both Army and Navy. There might be some helicopters which are required both for Air Force at the same time for Navy also. Such kind of inter-service defense equipments, if any are required, Chief of Defense Staff will be taking the decisions from now, right? This is another change that is brought. He is like only a first among the equals. You might have seen this term with respect to Chief Election Commissioner also, right? This Chief of Defense Staff is only like a first among the equals. Now, what is the meaning of this first among the equals? The objective is for coordination among the three armed forces. We have Army, Navy, and the Air Force. For coordination, for better coordination among these three wings of armed forces, this Chief of Defense Staff post was created. Chief of Defense Staff can only give directives to this Army, Navy, and Air Force only with respect to administrative purposes, not with respect to command directives. What is this command directives? Now the Chief of Defense Staff will not or cannot go to Army and say, do this attack or launch this missile. So such kind of command directives cannot be given by Chief of Defense Staff to any of the chiefs. This we have to know, right? He can only give administrative directives. Anything related to training exercises, anything related to defense equipment purchases, or anything required to upgrading the defense forces, only these type of directives the Chief of Defense Staff can give to this Army, Navy, or the Air Force people, right? He can't give command directives. This is one area where they can confuse us. So here we have to be careful. And also, he also plays the role of advisory role in Nuclear Command Authority. What is this Nuclear Command Authority? This Nuclear Command Authority takes care of the nuclear program of India, right? It devises strategies and plans like how to launch the nuclear attacks, where to keep the nuclear bases, when to start this nuclear attack. All these plans and strategies will be made by this Nuclear Command Authority. Now this Chief of Defense Staff is given an advisory role in this Nuclear Command Authority, right? So he is a part of this Nuclear Command Authority, that we have to know. He is the first among the equals. We have discussed this. And he enjoys the rank of secretary, right? He enjoys the rank of secretary. This is a peripheral point. And so basically we have discussed what is the objective: jointness in operations, right? Now if a war is being waged by any country on India, it can be through air, it can be through land, or it can be through sea also. So at any point of time, to have better defense preparedness, that means to have better preparedness in defense, a coordination should be there between Army, Navy, and Air Force. We don't know which one to be launched, right? It's a war. It's not like only the countries will be waging war in the land, right? It's not like it's land based war is different from air, and that is different from sea. So everything has to be worked in coordination and cooperation. For the jointness, this Chief of Defense Staff was created. That's why this is important, for jointness in the operations and synergy in the operations. For this Chief of Defense Staff was created. And this Chief of Defense Staff is also responsible for operation of theater commands or joint commands. Is responsible for the operation of theater commands or joint commands. You might have seen these theater commands in the news also. In Andaman and Nicobar Islands, we have a tri-service theater command, right? We have a base there in Andaman and Nicobar Islands where Army, Navy, and Air Force, all the three bases are together there. All the three bases are together in Andaman. So similarly, such kind of theater commands are being planned within India also, right? Within the mainland of India also, not only in Andaman, but also within the mainland of India. Now that function is also done by Chief of Defence Staff. Chief of Defence Staff will be the person who will be deciding on which places in India do we need to have this theater commands. Theater commands means more than one wing of armed forces working together. Army and Navy working together. Navy and Air Force working together. Or Army and Navy having a common base in a place. Right? So these kind of things are called theater commands. Joint operations. More than one wing of armed force will be working there. These are called theater commands. So to operationalize this theater commands also, Chief of Defence Staff is responsible, right? Integrated bases we will be having in this theater commands, that we have to know, right? So these are some points. And now with respect to appointment, removal and all those things, Chief of Defence Staff is not eligible to hold any government post after retirement. This is important. Chief of Defence Staff is not eligible to hold any government post after he retires from this position of Chief of Defence Staff. So this is done because, just imagine, Chief of Defence Staff is a very crucial and strategic post, right? He gives advices to the Defence Minister. He coordinates Army, Navy and the Air Force. So to have better checks and balances, this provision was kept, right? Is not eligible for any government post after his retirement. Now what about private jobs? Can he go for private jobs? Yes, he can go for private jobs after his retirement, but only with a government approval. Only with a government approval, and that too only after 5 years of cooling period. Only with the government approval and with a break of 5 years. Cooling period means the period in which he will not be eligible for appointment, right? This cooling period is there for other constitutional posts also, just find it out. So cooling period is very much required to remove any conflict of interest. So for any private jobs employment, Chief of Defence Staff can apply for private jobs after retirement, but only with government approval and 5 years cooling period. Right? This can be an option. They can say Chief of Defence Staff is not eligible for any appointment post retirement. We might think, yeah, it's a very crucial post, so maybe is not eligible for any kind of employment, but that's not the case. Only for government posts he is not responsible. For private posts he can join in the private companies, but only with government approval. That there we have to be careful. And also, because for this Chief of Defence Staff, as we have discussed, a Department of Military Affairs was created. So we need to know what are the other departments of defense also. Right? So those things which are in the limelight, those things which are in the news, we have to focus them for sure. But along with that, just give some time for other dimensions also of this topic, right? If Department of Military Affairs is created for Chief of Defence Staff, the other departments of defense are, department is Department of Defence Production. That is one department. Department of Defence, that is another department. Department of Research and Development, right? This does the R&D activities. And Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare, right? These are 4 departments: Department of Defence, Department of Defence Production, Department of R&D, and Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare. So these 4 departments are headed by different secretaries, right? Secretaries will be heading these different departments. Department of Military Affairs is being headed by Chief of Defence Staff, right? They can confuse us by giving an option saying Department of Defence Production is under Chief of Defence Staff. Now, if we know only partially that some department was created for Chief of Defence Staff, we'll go with that option, but that should not be the case. Department of Military Affairs is under the Chief of Defence Staff. The other departments are under Secretary, right? So these are the areas where they can play with us, guys. And as we have discussed, Chief of Defence Staff is a single point military advisor, right? But that does not imply the Army Chief cannot go and discuss with the Defence Minister. That's not the case. Right? Chief of Defence Staff will be the person talking to the Defence Minister about this Army, Navy and Air Force. But still, if there are any issues which are exclusively related to one service, then that service chief can go and talk to the Finance Minister, right? So if army chief is having any problem in his army service, then he can go and speak to the defense minister, right? If there is any issue related to army and navy and air force, then only chief of defense staff will go and negotiate. This difference is also important, guys, because in the options they can say for all the issues related to service chiefs, only chief of defense staff will be coordinating with defense minister, right? That is wrong. Only those issues related to joint operations, jointness in logistics, only anywhere where more than one service is involved, all those things chief of defense staff will be taking care. If there are any issues related to one specific service, then that service chief can go and negotiate or discuss with defense minister, right? That point is important. So the point is basically the three service chiefs can continue to advise defense ministers on matters exclusive to them, right? On matters exclusive to them. This difference is important. And what about the tenure? The tenure of chief of defense staff is not yet finalized, right? The tenure is not yet finalized, but the upper age limit is 65 years, right? Upper age limit is 65 years. Tenure is not yet finalized. So in the coming months, if the tenure is finalized, just update it, guys. And also the chief of defense staff is a member of Defense Acquisition Council. We all know what is the Defense Acquisition Council. This is the apex body for approval of any defense capital acquisition. That means any defense equipment we are purchasing from other countries or from private companies, then this Defense Acquisition Council is responsible for approving them, right? This newspaper also we can see 300 crores worth defense equipment is being bought as a part of emergency defense procurement. That's why also Defense Acquisition Council was in the news. And also chief of defense staff is a member of Defense Planning Committee also. So not only coordinating between Army, Navy and Air Force, but he has a lot of other jobs also. And is India the first country to create such a post? That is also not the case. Already US, UK, China, many other countries have created this post, right? So this can also be an option, saying that India is the first country to create such a post called Chief of Defense Staff, right? So we should not get carried away by those options. Already US, UK and China have these posts, right? So these are different points related to Chief of Defense Staff. I'll just tell them up quickly. So coordination among the three wings of armed forces is the prime objective of creating this Chief of Defense Staff. It's under Ministry of Defense. A separate department called Department of Military Affairs was also created. This Military Affairs Department is headed by Chief of Defense Staff. Kargil Review Committee and Naresh Chandra Committee, both these recommended Chief of Defense Staff. It's a long pending reform in the armed forces. It's like a single point military advisor to the defense minister. He is the permanent chairman for the Chief of Staff Committee also, in which the other service chiefs are members. Inter-service procurement decisions are done by this Chief of Defense Staff. He can provide directives to the three service chiefs, but not command directives. There you have to be careful. He also plays an advisory role in Nuclear Command Authority. He is like the first among the equals, and he enjoys the rank of secretary. Jointness in operations, synergy in operations, and operation of theater commands is also done by the Chief of Defense Staff. We have discussed what are theater commands, and he is not eligible for any government post after retirement, but he is eligible for private jobs after government approval and after 5 years of cooling period. The other departments of defense we have seen, and still the three service chiefs can go and talk to the defense minister if there is any matter exclusive to these three services. Tenure is not yet fixed and his age limit is 65 years. And he is also a member of Defense Acquisition Council and also Defense Planning Committee. And India is not the first country to create such a post. Already US, UK and China have created it. These are all the points and different ways how they can confuse us, guys. I have tried to give you those perspectives so that you can be careful. Now the second topic which we are taking up is Good Governance Index. Good Governance Index. Good Governance Index was launched on Good Governance Day. Good Governance Day is celebrated on 25th December every year. right? December 25th is the Good Governance Day. And on this Good Governance Day, this Good Governance Index was launched last year. That's why it's important for us with respect to prelims. And the December 25th is basically the birthday of our former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. So last year, December 25th, 3 initiatives were launched. One such initiative is Good Governance Index. There are other 2 initiatives also, just find them out, right? Just find them out. So one is basically a tunnel which was inaugurated on that day, on this 25th December, on birthday of Vajpayee ji, right? Just find out those 2 initiatives. And also another thing is Atal Bhujal Yojana. That is the other scheme which was launched on that day. So just find about Atal Bhujal Yojana and the tunnel also. So one of that initiative is Good Governance Index. So we will be discussing this. So why is this Good Governance Index launched? It's launched to basically assess the governance situation in different states and union territories, right? How is the governance in every state? What are some initiatives which the states have taken? And is the governance going in a better way or not? Which is the state which has taken good initiatives? To know all these things, this Good Governance Index was brought. Basically to measure the level of governance in every state and union territory. This is the objective of this index. And the other objectives are quantifying governance in the states. Quantifying means converting it into a number or a rank or an index. Right? That's what this Good Governance Index wants to do. What is the level of governance in a state? Converting it into a number. So quantifying governance in states, and also for result-oriented approaches, outcome-oriented approaches. Right? This assessment is basically, how is it trying to assess governance? By seeing the results and outcomes of the scheme. It's not measuring how many schemes are released by one state government for development. It's seeing what is the change or the development we can see, right? Result-oriented approach. So these are some things we have to know about good governance. And this index is based on 10 parameters, right? In 10 different sectors, it tries to analyze the governance or the government's initiatives, right? These 10 sectors are, first one is agriculture. Second one is commerce and industries. Third one is HRD, that is education, human resource development. Fourth one is health. The next one is infrastructure. 6, economic governance. 7th, social welfare. 8th, judiciary. 9th, environment. And 10th, citizen-centric governance, right? All these 10 areas, the Good Governance Index tries to analyze the performance of different states. Now, these areas are important because last year in 2019 prelims, there was a straightforward question saying, which of the following parameters are not there in ease of doing business? So, ease of doing business also has some parameters. Based on that, the rank is given, right? So, India's rank actually improved. So all were focusing on that rank improvement and which is the organization that publishes it, right? All these were being focused, but the parameters, only few people focus. So those who even went into the depth and have seen what all parameters are based on which ease of doing business is given, they could answer that. So in the similar lines, if a question is asked from Good Governance Index, we have to be in a position to answer it, right? So these are the 10 areas where Good Governance Index tries to analyze the states. Tamil Nadu emerged as the top performer in the big states, right? So also this Good Governance Index tries to divide the states into 3 categories. Just imagine, we can't compare Tamil Nadu with Assam or Meghalaya or Mizoram, right? They are smaller states. These are big states. So Good Governance Index tries to divide the territories into big states, that is one category, smaller states and hilly areas, that is second category, and union territories, that is the third category, right? So 3 categories the states are divided and the ranks are given. So in the big states category, Tamil Nadu emerged as the top performer. And in the hilly states and the small states, Himachal Pradesh emerged as the top performer. Himachal Pradesh. And in the union territories, Pondicherry or Puducherry emerged as the top performer. Right? So this is important, guys. So which is the state that has emerged first in different categories is important. And also, if possible, find the top 3 and the bottom 3 in every category. In the big states, which are the top 3 performers, right? And which are the top, the last 3 performers in the big states, the 3 worst states also. And similarly in the smaller states, which are the top 3 performers, which are the bottom 3 performers. Even for UTs also, just see. So big states, Tamil Nadu, small states, Himachal Pradesh, and UTs, Pondicherry. These are the top performers. And if we go sector wise, that is the 10 parameters, some parameters wise, health parameter wise, Kerala stood first. Right? This is obvious. Kerala state is known for human resource development. And economic governance wise, Karnataka emerged as first. And judicial wise, Tamil Nadu appeared first. Right? Tamil Nadu ended up as being the first. So these are some trends, guys. So it's better for us if we remember as many trends as possible. But one common trend which we can see is mostly the southern states are there. So if in case any northern states are given, and if we can't remember like in every parameter which is the state that emerged as first, at least these are some important parameters which I have told you. So you can try to eliminate. If you can't remember the exact state, at least by the trends, you can eliminate the options. And this good governance index is launched by Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions. Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions. Right? So these are some points which we have to know with respect to good governance index. So this was launched on Good Governance Day, 25th December. Find out the other 2 initiatives details also, right, which were launched on that day. One such initiative is Good Governance Index for measuring the status of governance in the states. 10 areas, the 10 parameters we have discussed. Tamil Nadu is the top performer in big states, Himachal Pradesh in the small states, and Pondicherry in the UTs. Find the top 3 and bottom 3 if possible. And Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions. This is the ministry that launches this Good Governance Index. Now the next topic which we are taking is RTI, Right to Information. Now RTI topic is important for this year prelims because of 2 reasons. One thing, there were some amendments done to the RTI Act. There were some amendments done to the RTI Act last year. And also Rajasthan has come up with a portal for RTI. Right? Because of these 2 things, R is important for us. So RTI full form is Right to Information, and the Act was enacted in 2005. Right? RTI Act 2005. The provisions of the Act we are not going to discuss now. You have the RTI portal of Rajasthan state, that is important. Last year, Rajasthan state government has launched a portal for RTI called Jana Suchana portal, right? Jana Suchana portal. This portal was launched by Rajasthan state government regarding RTI, right? Now this is important because this is the first ever public information portal in India. That's why this is important. This is first ever public information portal in India. So Rajasthan state government's initiative is first ever initiative for delivering public information to the people, right? That is important. Now, under the RTI Act, there is a section 4 of RTI Act which talks about suo motu disclosure of information, right? Section 4 of the RTI Act talks about suo motu disclosure of information. What is the suo motu disclosure? Suo motu disclosure means rather than people going to the government offices and asking for information, the state itself has to deliver the information to the people. This is called suo motu disclosure, right? Rather than people going to the public information offices and asking them information by appealing or petitioning, the government itself has to transparently and in an open way give as much information as possible to the people, right? So this definitely improves transparency and accountability. So this suo motu disclosure is under section 4 of the RTI Act. As a part of this suo motu disclosure, Rajasthan state government has launched this Jana Suchana portal, right? Because there can be a straightforward question saying Jana Suchana portal recently seen in news launched by, right? UP, MP, Rajasthan and some other state can be given. If we know, we can answer it, right? So Rajasthan has launched it. So the major benefit of such portals is proactive and real-time data delivery, right? Proactive and real-time data delivery. Transparency will be more, accountability will be more, proactiveness will be more, and real-time data can be given to the people, right? It's a portal, guys. So as it is a portal, immediately the information can be uploaded, right? So latest information can be given to the people rather than a person appealing for an information to PIO and he delivering it after some 15 days or 10 days. That causes delay. This is like real-time data delivery to the people, right? So this is about Jana Suchana portal. And other important thing is this is free of cost, right? This is free of cost. In free of cost, we are giving information to the people through a portal, right? That is also important. So all these are about Rajasthan RTI portal. Now we'll see the recent amendments which happened to RTI Act. 2 amendments were made to RTI Act. These 2 can be prelims questions, so we have to be thorough with them. First is related to security of tenure of Central Information Commission. We have a body called CIC, right? Central Information Commission. So this Central Information Commission has 1+10 body, right? 1+10. These many members will be there in this Central Information Commission. Now for this information commissioners, some changes were made. Firstly, security of tenure was removed. That means previously to these amendments, before these amendments were made, the Central Information Commissioners used to have 5 years of tenure or 65 years of age limit. 5 years of tenure or 65 years of age limit used to be there for these information commissioners. But after the amendment, it was said that the central government will be deciding the tenure of these information commissioners. Previously 5 years confirmed tenure used to be there, but now after the amendment, central government will be deciding the tenure of these information commissioners. This is an important change. The second change is related to salaries of the information commissioners. Previously, the information commissioners of CIC were treated equal to election commission. They were treated equal to election commissioners. What all benefits election commissioner used to have, the same salaries, same allowances used to be given to the CIC members also, right? But after the amendment, it is said that the salaries and allowances of this information commissioners will be decided by the government. They will be decided by the government from time to time. So in this way, a significant change was brought with respect to information commissioners, right? So first thing is security of tenure was reduced. Previously 5 years or 65 years of age is there, but now it will be decided by the government, right? The second thing is salaries also will be decided by government, right? So these can be confusing options, right? Related to RTI, if there is any question and if they say CIC enjoys a tenure of 5 years or 65 years of age, if we don't know that this amendment is done, then definitely we'll think that option is correct, right? So this is something which we have to update because last year only this change was brought. And the other dimension with respect to this amendments is these amendments are not only for the CIC, Central Information Commission, but also for the State Information Commission also, right? So federalism is being affected. This is also one argument that is brought with respect to this amendment, right? So not only for CIC, but also for State Information Commissioners also, central government will be deciding the tenure and central government will be deciding the salaries, right? So these are some points. Rajasthan, Janasuchna portal related to RTI, first ever public information portal, suo motu disclosure related to section 4 of the RTI, proactive and real-time data delivery, free access to the people with such portals, the recent amendments, no security of tenure will be decided by the government, salaries will be decided by the government of the information commissioners, not only central information commissioners, but also the state information commissioners. Central government will decide. These are some points, guys, with respect to RTI. Now we'll take up environment topics. So today we'll try to discuss COP25 summit, which happened last year in the month of December. COP25 summit. So every year December, this COP summit takes place, right? So we have to know each and every detail of that COP summit, the terms which they have used, any agreements which they have made, or any controversial issues happened in that COP summit. All these things we have to know, because at least one question will come from this COP25 summit, because they discuss variety of issues, right? We'll see all those in detail. So first of all, COP25 summit happened in Madrid, Spain. This is the first thing we have to know with respect to prelims. Where did it happen? It happened in Madrid, Spain. In 2018 also there was a COP24 summit. That happened in Katowice, Poland, right? That happened in Katowice, Poland. COP25 summit happened in Madrid, Spain, right? It happened in Madrid, Spain. Now, who is the presidency for this COP25 summit? It is Chile, right? Chile, country Chile in South America, right? That was the presidency for the COP25 summit. This year, this is one place where they can confuse us, because usually where the COP summit takes place, that country only will be the presidency also. But last year, because of protests going on in Chile, you can see that issue also. Just go through the net. At that time, in the month of December last year, Chile protests were going on. Because of that, the COP25 summit was shifted to Madrid, Spain. So this happened in Spain, but Chile is the presidency. And what is the COP25 summit? We know that it is related to climate change summit, right? Now, under which convention these summits take place? It is UNFCCC, right? UNFCCC convention. Under this convention, this COP25 summit takes place every year. Last year it took place in Madrid, Spain, right? And what is the COP? COP means Conference of Parties. Conference of Parties. Parties means all the countries which are a part of this UNFCCC convention. All these countries come together and take decisions. That is called COP. So COP is the highest decision making body for this UNFCCC convention, right? Now, what was the objectives of the summit? There are some 2 to 3 important points that were fixed or that were decided by the countries to discuss. Firstly, finishing the rule book for 2015 Paris Agreement. Finishing the rule book for 2015 Paris Agreement. Secondly, some unresolved issues in COP24 summit. The COP24 summit which took place in Poland, there were some unresolved issues. To solve those issues also was one of the agenda of this summit. Some issues were carbon markets, climate finance, loss and damage clause. Carbon markets, climate finance, loss and damage clause. All these issues the countries have decided to discuss in this COP25 summit. Every term is important, guys. What is carbon markets? What is loss and damage? What is climate finance? We need to know everything in detail. And the third objective is enhancing the NDCs, enhancing the nationally determined contributions of every country. That was also an object, right? So these issues were not resolved in COP24 summit. That's why COP25 summit, the same issues were taken up, right? Now, before discussing about what happened in the summit and what something new that took place in the summit, we have to know the difference between Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement. What is Kyoto Protocol? What is Paris Agreement? So to simply say it, Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement both talk about climate change only, right? Both talk about efforts that the countries need to make towards climate change. But one significant difference between Kyoto and Paris is Kyoto Protocol is for 2005 to 2020, right? Kyoto Protocol deals about climate change efforts from 2005 to 2020. It ends at 2020. Paris Agreement will start from 2020, right? From Jan 1st, 2020, Paris Agreement targets will be started. So the thing we have to know here is Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015 year, but in the 2015 it was only adopted. It will be starting from 2020. That is one difference which we have to know, basic difference. What is the difference between Kyoto and Paris, right? However, Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement both are a part of UNFCCC convention, right? Both are part of UNFCCC convention only. Now, what is this UNFCCC convention? This UNFCCC convention started in 1992 Rio Earth Summit. There is a summit called 1992 Rio Earth Summit. Just Google it and get to know about it if anyone doesn't know in case. So under this Rio Summit, UNFCCC convention was made, right? United Nations Framework to Combat Climate Change. This is the full form, United Nations Framework to Combat Climate Change. This is UNFCCC. So this convention was made. Under this, Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement came, right? This we have to know, we have to be clear. So every year this COP summit discusses some reports. So those reports are very much important for us. Now the COP25 summit discussed about 4 important reports. One of the report is emissions gap report by UNEP. This we have discussed yesterday only. So just go through the important points. Emissions gap report by UNEP. That report is important because that is discussed in COP25 summit. And IPCC reports. There is a panel called IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is like a research body for this COP summit. So this gives some good reports to this COP summit so that countries can discuss on them, right? So this IPCC gave 3 reports last year. All the 3 reports are important because they can simply say, for example, the 3 reports are, first report is special report on global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Find out these 3 reports because they can simply say special report on global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. This report was given by IPCC, UNEP, or Worldwide Fund Program, right? Like these options can be there. IPCC is something which gave 3 reports. One is about warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Second one, land use policy. Third one about polar and ocean regions, right? This is one report given by IPCC. The other report was given on special report on climate change and land use. Climate change and land use. That is the second report. Third report is related to Arctic and polar and ocean, right? Polar and ocean, polar region and ocean. These 3 reports, just go through them. Remember the names of the reports, if not the details. And UNEP emissions gap report, that also you have to know. And now loss and damage clause. This was something discussed in COP summit. What is this loss and damage clause? Loss and damage clause means all those developing countries which are being affected because of climate change intensified disasters. Now we know that cyclones happen every year, but nowadays because of climate change, these cyclones are getting intensified, right? Their frequency is increasing, their intensity is increasing, because of which developing countries and underdeveloped countries are facing the heat, right? They are the ones who are suffering. But who was responsible for this? There is some historical dimension for this. It is the developed countries and the pollution which they have done, which is responsible for the climate change now. So developed countries have the responsibility to help the developing and the underdeveloped countries now, because these countries are suffering or they are facing the challenge of climate change induced disasters. So this is the philosophy of loss and damage, right? Now this loss and damage clause was adopted in COP19. Right from the COP19 summit onwards, they were discussing on loss and damage, but they could not come to a conclusion. So COP25 summit is also discussing on this. COP19 summit first spoke about this loss and damage clause, and this was adopted under Warsaw International Mechanism. Warsaw is a place in Poland. Now loss and damage clause, this was something discussed in COP summit. What is this loss and damage clause? Loss and damage clause means all those developing countries which are being affected because of climate change intensified disasters. Now we know that cyclones happen every year, but nowadays because of climate change, these cyclones are getting intensified. Their frequency is increasing, their intensity is increasing, because of which developing countries and underdeveloped countries are facing the heat, right? They are the ones who are suffering. But who was responsible for this? There is some historical dimension for this. It is the developed countries and the pollution which they have done, which is responsible for the climate change now, right? So developed countries have the responsibility to help the developing and the underdeveloped countries now, because these countries are suffering or they are facing the challenge of climate change induced disasters. So this is the philosophy of loss and damage, right? Now this loss and damage clause was adopted in COP19. Right from the COP19 summit onwards, they were discussing on loss and damage, but they could not come to a conclusion. So COP25 summit is also discussing on this, right? So COP19 summit first spoke about this loss and damage clause, and this was adopted under Warsaw International Mechanism. Warsaw is a place in Poland. So this loss and damage, now I suppose everyone knows what is this loss and damage. It's basically developed countries helping the developing countries to cope up with climate change induced disasters, right? So that is loss and damage. For further details, please search in net, guys. The second thing which the countries have discussed about is common but differentiated responsibilities. This term is also important. Common but differentiated responsibilities. What is this common but differentiated responsibilities? It says all the countries have to put efforts. However, not at the same level. Developed countries have to put more efforts. Developing countries will put less efforts, proportionate to what their stand is. That's what this CBDR says. Common but differentiated responsibility. That means every country should be a part of this climate change. However, not at the same level, right? Developed countries should do something bigger and greater towards climate change rather than developing countries. This is the philosophy behind that. And India strongly supports this common but differentiated responsibilities, right? So that's why this is important. What this says developed countries should invest more money in reducing the climate change. They should invest more technology. In fact, they should give good technology and more money to the developing countries to fight against climate change, as they are more polluters, right? Developed countries polluted for many centuries. And because of that, we are seeing the effects now, right? So based on that historical dimension only, this common but differentiated responsibilities term came, right? This term also we should be thorough. And carbon markets was also something discussed in COP25 summit. What is carbon markets? Carbon markets means simply one country will be reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. There will be a target for every country, right? If one country has to reduce some X carbon emissions, it might reduce even more, right? More than what is required. That more which it has reduced, it can sell it as certificates to other countries. Now, other countries which fail to meet their targets can buy these certificates from these countries, right? This is carbon markets. This is the carbon market mechanism, right? For further details, you just refer net. So this is basically about trading of carbon credits, right? Trading of carbon credits. So the issue here is carbon markets mechanism was involved in Kyoto Protocol. So if Kyoto Protocol is expiring in 2020, carbon markets also will expire in 2020. But India has accumulated so many carbon certificates, right? Carbon market certificates. Now this is a problem for India. Now there is an uncertainty whether these will be carried for Paris Agreement or not. That is the major problem. And double counting is also a major problem. This term is also important, guys. Double counting. Double counting means now one country has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions, and even more than its targets it has reduced, so that excess it will sell as certificates to another country. Now that other country is also claiming, this country is also claiming in efforts, right? This is called double counting. Now if only 1 kg of carbon dioxide is reduced, both the countries are claiming it. This is called double counting, guys. So this double counting problem is there in carbon markets. That also we have to know, right? All these terms which I am telling now, straightforward questions can be there. Double counting, carbon markets, carbon credits, Kyoto Protocol, CBDR, loss and damage clause, right? All these we have to be thorough. And this COP summit, they have called it as Blue COP, Blue COP Summit. This is also important with respect to prelims, right? Blue COP. Because the presidency is Chile country, and Chile country has a long coastline in the South America, if you observe the map. So that's why this summit was termed as Blue COP. And also the country said that this is not climate crisis, but the present situation is climate emergency. This is something which all the countries agreed as a part of COP25 summit. It's not climate crisis, but it is climate emergency, right? And Chile Madrid time for action. This was the agreement that was adopted. The agreement that was adopted in COP25 summit is Chile Madrid time for action. So this spoke about 4 issues. Emissions gap, right? Yesterday we have discussed what is emissions gap. So it said that all the countries have to bridge this emissions gap. Second thing, carbon markets. Carbon markets problem has to be resolved. But unfortunately, it was not resolved and it is postponed to COP26 summit this year. Climate finance issue was also unresolved. That is also carried away to COP26. One new concept is gender action plan. Gender action plan. That means how this climate change is affecting in a gender angle, gender-based angle, right? Gender sensitive approaches should be there for this climate change. So gender action plan was adopted under this Chile Madrid time for action, right? And also Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This talks about carbon markets, right? So there can be a question saying Article 6 of the Paris Agreement related to. We might wonder, there will be number of articles in the Paris Agreement. Why did they ask only Article 6? But this is in news since 1 year, right? So we need not remember the entire Paris Agreement or the entire provisions of the Paris Agreement. Only those things which are in news, which are creating controversy. If we focus on them, at least we can answer up to some extent, if not fully, right? So Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is about carbon markets. So this is everything about COP25 summit, guys. So I'll just brush it up. It was held in Spain, Madrid. Presidency was Chile. It's a part of UNFCCC convention. COP means Conference of Parties, highest decision-making body. Objective of the summit is finishing the Paris Agreement rule book, carbon markets issue, climate finance issue, loss and damage issue, enhancing the NDCs issue. These all were not solved in COP24. That's why COP25 also. Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, the changes we have discussed, the differences. UNFCCC 1992 Rio Earth Summit and the reports, UNEP emissions gap report, IPCC, the 3 reports, and loss and damage clause, common but differentiated responsibilities, carbon markets mechanism, issue of double counting, and blue COP. That also we have discussed. Not climate crisis, but climate emergency. Gender action plan under Chile Madrid time for action. So all these, Article 6 of Paris Agreement, right? All these are just the words. I'm just throwing the important words to you so that if you at least remember these, you can somehow or the other try to attack the question, right? So when you have time, just go into details of all these topics. And the second thing we are discussing today is Assam gas leak and Russia oil leak, right? So last month these two issues happened, Assam gas leak and Russia oil leak. Assam gas leak happened in Tinsukia district of Assam. Tinsukia district, Baghjan well, Baghjan, Baghjan well. So in Baghjan well, Tinsukia district, this Assam gas leak happened. This is important because gas leak happened nearby to Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. There is a national park called Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. Nearby this national park, this gas leak happened. And also there was a wetland nearby to this Magori Motapung. Magori, M-A-G-O-R-I, Magori Motapung, M-O-T-A-P-U-N-G. This wetland was also affected because of this Assam gas leak. And Dangori River, D-A-N-G-O-R-Y, Dangori River, right? All these three were affected because of this Assam gas leak, guys. So they may not ask us like what was the national park that was affected in Assam gas leak, but they can ask us by simply asking Dibru-Saikhowa National Park is located in, and 4 states can be given, right? Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Tripura, Mizoram. So it's difficult for us. So we have to remember such things. So Assam gas leak we have to know, but the main important things we have to know is which rivers were affected, which wetlands were affected, what is the national park that is affected, is it a UNESCO heritage site? All these things we have to know, right? Gangetic dolphins also died because of this Assam gas leak. And this Dibru-Saikhowa National Park is one of the 19 biodiversity hotspots in the world. In the world, there are 19 biodiversity hotspots. Find out what is this biodiversity hotspot. So among those 19 biodiversity hotspots, Dibru-Saikhowa National Park is one of that hotspot. So that is affected because of Assam gas leak, right? And also this Dibru-Saikhowa National Park and this Magori Motapung wetland, both these are bird areas also, important bird areas. So this is all about Assam gas leak. It happened in Tinsukia district, Baghjan oil and gas well, Dibru-Saikhowa National Park was affected, Magori Motapung wetland was affected, Dangori River was affected, Gangetic dolphins died, right? This Dibru-Saikhowa National Park is one of the 19 biodiversity hotspots. All this we have to remember. Now the Russian oil leak. Russian oil leak, I suppose everyone has followed that issue. So the important thing which you have to know there is which river was affected. It was Ambar-Naya River, right? A-M-B-A-R, Ambar-Naya, N-A-Y-A, Ambar-Naya River. This Ambar-Naya River was impacted because of this Russia oil leak, right? So if you see last year in the prelims paper 2019, there was not much difference between environment questions and geography questions. There was a question where match the following was given, where on the one side mountains were given and on the other side rivers were given. Question, animals were given and their habitats were given, right? So this can be a geography question and also an environment question also. If we see it in perspective of geography, it is just a river and a mountain relation. But all those mountains or all those species which they have asked were in the news from the last 2 years. That's why they have asked them, right? So with respect to that, this Russian oil leak, we have to know that Ambar-Naya River of Russia was impacted. And Russia declared a state of emergency in the area where this oil leak happened, because this Ambar-Naya River goes and merges with Arctic Ocean, right? It goes and merges with Arctic Ocean. Now Arctic Ocean will also be polluted because of this oil spill. Nearly 20,000 tons of diesel, guys, that much 20,000 tons of diesel was let into this Ambar-Naya River. Now Arctic Ocean will also be impacted because of this oil leak, right? So all these are some topics which we have discussed today. So these are the environment and governance topics. And if you see today's newspaper, some issues where you can focus are partial credit guarantee scheme. Partial credit guarantee scheme. This is scheme to improve liquidity for NBFCs. Just find it out who is implementing and what is being done in that. Second thing is US has revoked special trade status for Hong Kong. Just find out that also, what is the special trade status. And the third thing is Melghat Tiger Reserve was in the news. Melghat Tiger Reserve, that's located in Maharashtra. See, why is it in news? Where is it located? What is the specialty of that and everything? And State of Food Security and Nutrition in World report. There was a report that was released, right? State of Food Security and Nutrition in World report. Just see who found out, who publishes this report, what are some interesting findings in this report, right? And also Prime Minister gave a statement called skill, reskill and upskill, right? He gave a statement, skill, reskill and upskill, and he spoke about Kaushal Kendras. Just see how these Kaushal Kendras, which ministry, under which ministry they come, what are some schemes for skill development and so on, right? There was also quota on Maratha community. This issue was also there in the news. So just see what are some enabling provisions for reservations. Only state government, only central government can give, or state government can also give reservations. Just see all those relations, right? And there was also an article saying India's population peaks by 2047. Just see which states are doing well in population control. Which is the state with largest population explosion right now?